Okay, so we are getting ready to learn how to do our paper mache letter. So for this project, the first thing that you need to choose is what letter you're using. You can use any letter, first letter of your first or last name, your favorite letter, or just any random letter. One thing I do want you to keep in mind is with this project, you are going to be painting at the end. You are going to be painting different objects, items, or things that start with the letter. So if you're going to choose a letter, say the letter Z, you need to make sure that you know multiple items or objects that start with the letter Z that you can draw and paint. So I have already gotten my letter. You're going to get a piece of cardboard. You're going to choose your letter, and with large block letters, you're going to draw the letter onto the cardboard, and then you are going to cut it out using an X-Acto knife. Please remember that when using our X-Acto knives, they are to be used to cut only. When you are done with them, you put them back. If I see anything different, then there will be consequences. So I already have my letter. I'm using a G for Gleiser. All right. So I've taken and I've cut it out. Now, one thing I do want you to look at is at the bottom. Do you see how it's a flat? Very flat. That's so that when it is set on the table, once this is three-dimensional, it will be able to stand up on its own. The last thing that you want is a letter like a G or an S or something that has a rounded base to truly be rounded at the bottom, because it will not be able to stand up and your finished product won't be as nice as you want it to. So I drew the letter G and I cut it out. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that letter and you're going to trace it onto a second piece of cardboard. That way you end up with two exact letters that are exactly the same. And this is very important. You want them to be exact. Do not try and just draw another letter, because it will not work. You need to make sure that you are tracing them so that they are the exact same. All right. Now, I've done a portion of this already to save a little time, but I am going to show you each step of the project. Once you have both of your cardboard letters drawn and cut out using that X-Acto knife, put the X-Acto knife away. Then you are going to need to get out Dixie cups. Now, we are just sharing our Dixie cups, so please, please come and talk to me and I will get your Dixie cups for you. You're not going to use an entire box, but you want to grab a decent amount, and you want a bottle of glue. All right. So what you're going to do at this point is the Dixie cups are going to allow us to make a three-dimensional form. You are going to be gluing your Dixie cups down to your cardboard, and this is going to take majority of the class, and so you will let this dry overnight. But the easiest thing to do is to take your glue and your cup and very carefully just put glue around the edge, the lip of the cup, just like I'm doing here. Once you have glue, please glue your Dixie cup in place. Now, you are going to be putting a Dixie cup everywhere that you can until your letter is covered up, just like this. If you have a gap like I have here on the corner, it is okay. You do need to make sure that when you are making your letter that you are making it at least 2 inches thick at all parts. If you get thinner than that, then the cup will overhang and your project will not work. So once all of your Dixie cups are glued down and you let this dry overnight, the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to place your second piece of letter, your second letter, on top, just like I've done here. So do you see how we're getting that three-dimensional form? Okay. I want to make sure that my letters are in sync with each other. They're aligned. And then you are going to take masking tape and we're going to wrap it up. Once you have your masking tape and your Dixie cups are in place, you're going to take your masking tape, and all we are doing is wrapping our letter so that it stays together. One thing I would suggest is to just work with small strands of your tape. If you try and go around and around again and again, it's going to end up getting a little too complicated. So stick your tape on one side and very carefully, making sure that your letters are still aligned, nice and tightly, wrap it around. What you're doing here is you're creating an edge where the Dixie cups are, and you're holding the two pieces together, just like this. You're going to do this over your entire letter. If your tape gets really thin in an area, it's okay. Just keep working. Sometimes our tape is thick and we get uneven pieces. But start with your letter. You can start by doing a couple different areas before going back to an area you've already taped. Or if you have done what I just did, where I've gotten this piece that's not quite straight, you can rewrap it. So you're taping these together. All right, once your letter has been fairly well covered in tape, like I've done with mine here, and you don't have to have every spot of it filled in with tape, but the more solid your figure is with the tape before you get started on the paper mache, the more solid your foundation will be. It will keep it from having a lot of indentions in the side where there wasn't a hard piece of cardboard. And so you do want to get quite a bit with the tape. And after you wrap a couple pieces, what I have found is the easiest way to cover yours, especially because there are a lot of curves, is to just get small strips like this and do one side at a time. So just tape a little bit down, make sure it's nice and tight, and just cover one little spot at a time. Now the next thing that you're going to need to work on your letter is your paper mache paste, and it will be in a container like this, and strips of newspaper. Now some of the strips of newspaper may be already torn for you, but if they are not, or if you run out, I want to show you the easiest way to tear your newspaper. You want to make sure that you are tearing with the grain of the paper. Just like when you're sanding wood, you go with the grain. So what that looks like is where the newspaper folds, you want to tear down, tear vertically. What will happen is you get a nice little, about a 1-inch strip like this. Now I want to show you what happens if you tear the other way. Do you see the difference? You want a nice strip like this. You don't want to do this. So make sure you're tearing with the grain. Now please remember back to our rules for paper mache. The first thing that you're going to want to do before you start paper macheing is take one strip, and it doesn't have to be a super long strip like this. You might split it in half. Take a Sharpie and write your name on it. So I'm going to write my name. And you are going to set this piece that has your name on it. You want to set it aside and use that last. Now for the paper mache, if you are wearing any rings, if you have on long sleeves, take your rings off, roll your sleeves up. This does get messy, but we are going to keep it as clean as possible. So obviously we are going to be sticking our newspaper strips into the paste. Please make sure that you are keeping as much of the paste in your container as possible. And you're not sticking your whole hand. I should not see anyone with their hand completely submerged in our paste. If I see that, it will be a lunch detention. So you're going to dip your newspaper strip in the paper mache, and you don't have to coat the whole thing, because what's going to happen is as it comes out, the areas like mine that are not covered, you're going to take your fingers and pretend like they're scissors, and you are going to remove the excess down into that container. And what that does is those areas that were not covered in paste kind of get covered as you do that. And then you're very carefully going to just lay that newspaper strip over top of your letter, over top of the tape. Now you want to kind of make sure that everything is getting smoothed down, and you're going to continue doing this. Hopefully your letter stands like mine is. That will make it easier. You're going to continue to do this with your paste in the newspaper until your entire letter is covered. Now this will take more than one day, and that is perfectly fine. What you need to make sure is at the end of class, when you are ready to clean up, that you are making sure that you're putting your letter on the shelf to dry. that any newspaper that has paper mache paste on it, whether it was used on your letter or if it just had newspaper, the paste dripped onto it, gets thrown in the trash. That's very important, because if you are leaving it with all of our good newspaper, that is going to harden and dry overnight, and what we are going to be left with is unusable. So make sure that you are throwing away anything that has got the newspaper on it. Make sure as you're doing this, you can lay it in different directions, overlap it. You don't have to just keep going around and around. You can lay strips horizontally, diagonally, but you are going to cover this entire thing. You're also going to be making several different layers, okay? So once you get it covered once, you're going to go back through, you're going to make sure, see if there's any holes or gaps in your paper mache and on your letter, and then you will cover those up. Remember, please make sure that you are removing that excess paper mache down into the container and not onto the table or your neighbor. All right. This does get messy. Your hands are going to be covered. You will use a baby wipe at the end of class to clean off your hands. Make sure you're covering everything. Okay. Just like I'm doing here. You're just going to slowly start covering all of your different pieces. You don't want any of your newspaper strips to get too thick. So this one was one of the corners. It's a little thicker than I intended it to be. I'm going to work with it. But if you find one like that, you can move on to a different one. You can try it, or you can tear it in half. But the thicker these pieces get, the harder they are to smooth down. Now, I'm going to continue this, and I will do another video once it's done of the next portion of this project.